Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining us for Oil's Ramadan program. My name is Sumaya Kaku. I am the Secretary for the Board of Directors for the organization. We are honored today to have Sheikh Ali Raza Kaki with us to give us a series of lectures. We will be using menti.com to enable people to submit questions. The code is 250400. This information will also be provided on the screen closer to the time. As a humble request on behalf of the organization, if there is anything that we can improve upon or anything that you would like us to change, please let us know. We are always open to any comments that will help us grow to better serve our community. We would like to begin the program with a recitation from the Holy Quran by Muhammad Asaria.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام ميم أحسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون ولقد فتنا الذين من قبلهم فليعلمن الله الذين صدقوا وليعلمن الكاذبين أم حسب الذين يعملون السيئات أن يسبقونا ساء ما يحكمون من كان يرجو لقاء الله فإن أجل الله لآت وهو السميع العليم ومن جاهد فإنما يجاهد لنفسه إن الله لغني عن العالمين والذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات لنكفرن عنهم سيئاتهم ولنجزينهم أحسن الذي كانوا يعملون ووصينا الإنسان بوالديه حسنا وإن جاهداك لتشرك بي ما ليس لك به علم فلا تطعهما إلي مرجعكم فأنبئكم بما كنتم تعملون والذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات لندخلنهم في الصالحين ومن الناس من يقول آمنا بالله فإذا أوذي في الله جعل فتنة الناس كعذاب الله ولئن جاء نصر من ربك ليقولن إنا كنا معكم أوليس الله بأعلم بما في صدور العالمين وليعلمن الله الذين آمنوا وليعلمن المنافقين وقال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا اتبعوا سبيلنا ولنحمل خطاياكم وما هم بحاملين من خطاياهم من شيء إنهم لكاذبون وليحملن أثقالهم وأثقالهم مع أثقالهم وليسألن يوم القيامة عما كانوا يفترون ولقد أرسلنا نوحا إلى قومه فلبث فيهم 1000 سنة إلا 50 عاما فأخذهم الطوفان وهم ظالمون فأنجيناه وأصحاب السفينة وجعلناها آية للعالمين وإبراهيم إذ قال لقومه اعبدوا الله واتقوه ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون إنما تعبدون من دون الله أوثانا وتخلقون إفكا إن الذين تعبدون من دون الله لا يملكون لكم رزقا فابتغوا عند الله الرزق واعبدوه واشكروا له إليه ترجعون.
صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Sheikh Ali is a graduate of Al Mahdi Institute in Birmingham, United Kingdom, and has been involved in Hausa studies for over 7 years. He has been actively involved in social cohesion in Birmingham and currently works in the interfaith field. He is also involved in research, teaching, and is also involved in postgraduate studies in Islamic sciences at the University of Birmingham. Please can we welcome him with the salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين وهو خير ناصر ومعين أما بعد. As has been mentioned in the topic, I will be looking at the prophetic stories in Surah Ankabut and some lessons that we can get from this surah in regard to the prophetic stories. I won't be limiting myself to just the prophetic stories. I will also be looking at the verses around the stories and how we can implement it in our lives. So Surah Ankabut, chapter 29, Ankabut, as you may know, is translated as spider. Now, in it, the reason why it is mentioned or named such is because of an analogy that Allah draws, that those who have taken other than Allah, who have relied on other than Allah, they are as though those who have relied on the weakness of the spider web. Or rather, it's alluding to the weakness of the spider web. And this is an analogy that Allah draws in many places in the Quran. So in places where it may talk about water from the skies. So Allah is very descriptive like this. And these tools are very powerful for us to take messages. The analogies drawn have an impact on us, and we tend to resonate with them and take lessons from them. So in the next slide, I will show you how there are roughly 3 points that I will be looking at, 3 messages from this surah. The first is faith, belief, and action. As we saw, the surah starts off with that do those who claim to believe not say that they won't be tested. Rather, we will test them just as we have tested those before them. So that's the first 10 odd verses are of that sort of theme of faith, belief, action, and the impact it has on the individual. Then we will look at the examples of previous communities, i.e. the prophetic examples, the examples of communities, the examples of people who are condemned in the Quran, and we can learn from them. Now, the Quran utilizes this tool of imagination. So at times the Quran gives or draws the picture of people in hell talking to people in heaven. And this again is a very powerful tool for us to take lesson from. You know, sometimes you may have a habit. That habit has an emotion attached to that. And certain practitioners may encourage you to associate that habit with something that you may not like, to break that habit. Similarly, this tool is utilized within the Quran of drawing these examples, these imaginative scenes, which may be very real also, but it also evokes something within us that brings us out of that situation that we're in and makes us realize the reality of the situation. Then the third message or important message that is got from this surah is the temporality of this world. And the Quran mentions this time and time again. Surah Ankabut mentions this. And the reason why I've chosen this surah is because these are the nights of Laylatul Qadr. And we recite, it's recommended to recite Surah Ankabut, Rum, and Dukhan. Now, these three surahs have these themes somewhat within them, maybe in a different order, but it's there. It's there to make us realize. And these nights of Qadr, the nights of Ramadan, aren't there for us to just have a tick box exercise of finishing as many surahs or as many a'mals as we can, but rather there are nights for reflection. There are nights for us to take heed. There are nights of awakening. As God says that the heart of the believer is the sanctuary of God. So don't let anything other than God enter that heart. And this is what these surahs are supposed to evoke within us. When we see the faith and we ask ourselves, how is our faith? When we see these examples of previous communities, we relate with these stories and ask ourselves how we are reacting in situations similar to these communities, how our society is reacting. When we look at the temporality of the world, we realize that we're here just for a short time. And Allah alludes to this. Do they not see this and do they not see that? Do they not realize that He is the one who has created everything? So roughly speaking, these are the salient messages from the surah. Of course, you can go in detail and get many more, but these are just some three rough points that I have brought out that we can hopefully benefit from. So in the next slide, we have these pictures. Now, these pictures may evoke some emotion within us. If you look at these pictures, we have the shrine of Imam Ali there, we have the Kaaba, we have the Quran. Now, these may evoke something within us. Perhaps we may identify with these things. And sometimes we adopt an identity. We may say that we are Muslims. We may say that we are Shias. We may say that we are Shia Ithna Ashari. We may go even further and say that we are Shia Ithna Ashari who are maybe Usuli. We may even go further and say that we are Shia Ithna Ashari Usuli who follow a certain scholar. Now, identity in and of itself may not be a bad thing. And it is a good thing for us to identify and differentiate. As the Quran mentions, we have made you into tribes and races so that you may recognize one another. So in and of itself, it may not be a bad thing. In and of itself, it can be utilized for good. It can be utilized for getting communities together, to getting individuals together, to bring about some good in society. The problem comes about when we start boxing ourselves in boxes and we box everybody else in different boxes. And then we look down at that individual, or we think ourselves to be superior to everybody else. That's when the issue may come about. What were these identities for? They were supposed to bring about an awakening. They're supposed to bring about some greater good within us. It's supposed to bring about that motivation of helping one another and helping all through an identity. Identity can be utilized in a positive way. As an example may be given that sometimes you may have tasks and this links to belief. you may have a task, and you may think that you want to, every day you want to read a certain amount. However, every day passes and you don't end up reading that amount, or you have a resolution that every day you're going to do an X amount of exercise. It doesn't happen. However, certain specialists in the field have mentioned, if you change it from the action to the identity to the belief, and identify yourself as being motivated, as being clever, as pumping that positivity within yourself, it may have a positive impact. So you change it, you flip it and say that, you know what, I'm clever, I'm healthy, and it befits me to continue exercising or continue reading. So it has some positivity, and there's no doubt about it. But the problem is when identity becomes a block to God, a block in becoming aware of God. And this is what the surah is alluding to. Do those who claim, as the first verse, the second verse says, أَحَسِبَ النَّاسُ أَن يُتْرَكُوا أَن يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ. Does man think that they will be left by just saying they believe and not be tested? This is what it's all about. Some of us claim that we're believers, but when we are tested, when we are put under tribulation, we realize what we are really. We realize what our values are. We realize that we may be weak in certain situations. Now, I may have thought that I'm a very calm person. However, as life goes on, and I realize with children that actually I have something to build upon, that I have something to improve, I have something of an emotion that I need to get control of. And this is what it's all about. Many of us claim belief. Many of us claim to be followers of Ali. Many of us claim to be followers of the Prophet. But when push comes to shove, as these first few verses show, when they are tested, you actually see the reality. Bringing it to today's current situation in the coronavirus crisis, pandemic, we realize that in this situation, we are forced to live or spend a large amount of time with our household members. And that makes us realize how our interaction is with them. It makes us recognize that which was latent within us sometimes. It makes us aware. And that's the main thing, to be aware about how you feel, what your emotions are, what your buttons are that push you, and build on that and become better individuals. How is your faith? And this is what these verses are alluding to. And the verse continues, وَلَقَدْ فَتَنَّ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ. We have tested those who have gone before them. فَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ صَدَقُوا وَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ الْكَاذِبِينَ. And Allah knows and realizes which one of you are the truthful and which one of you are not. So these situations are very important for us to realize, and we'll all be tested in whatever situation we will be tested, as Allah promises that we will all test you. The main thing is to recognize how you're feeling, to recognize what is going on within you, to recognize where you stand in your faith. And these circumstances are a catalyst for us to realize that. So identity in and of itself is not bad, but identity which brings us to God, brings us to the betterment of society, is one that we should aspire to. So that's the first sort of few verses of Surah Ankabut that we can take a lesson from. The next slide is the prophetic stories in this surah. And this is hopefully going to be the focus of the next few nights. And I may go around a few verses as mentioned previously, and look at the different lessons that we can get, not necessarily on the Prophet's lives, but they link up to the Prophet's lives anyway. So we have storytelling. Storytelling is such a powerful way of conveying a message. And this goes back to the time of the cavemen. As you can see the image there, that they would draw these images on the cave to convey a message, to convey a story. Now we relate very much to stories. Today we have podcasts, we have YouTube, we have all these different platforms where people convey their stories. And we really love listening to stories. We really love listening to juicy stories. We really love listening to stories that are personal, that have that connection. We resonate with it. So we have these trending YouTube videos of individuals telling us how they make their money, and how they go through life, and how they've overcome certain challenges or sicknesses and situations in life, and we enjoy listening to those stories because of the connection, that resonance that we have, that relatability that we have with that other human being. Similarly, the Quran outlines these different stories of individuals who lived lives just as we live our life, who have undergone situations, family situations, just as we undergo family situations. Now, another interesting thing about stories is the way you can get lessons from stories. So one estimate suggests that we can learn or recall facts up to 22 more times effectively when they're just mentioned as data as opposed to in a story. So if it's in a story, we are more likely to get the message. We are more likely to recall the facts as opposed to when it's just raw data. In addition to that, there are emotive factors that occur within our body because of stories. We have chemicals that are pumped within our bloodstream because of us relating to stories. And perhaps we can identify when watching a movie, or we get excited when certain scenes are happening. We relate to that scene. At times we feel sad, and different chemicals are released into our body. We have oxytocin, for example, that's released to the blood. The empathy hormone that helps people bond when it's a character-driven story. So all these things are evoking something within us. They're bringing something about within us. In the Quran, in Surah Ankabut, we have these different individuals who are mentioned. There's Prophet Nuh, there's Ibrahim, there's Lut, there's Ishaq, Yaqub, Shuaib. And then the surah also mentions communities, Ad and Thamud. And then it also mentions individuals who may have done bad, like Qarun, Fir'aun, and Haman. All of these things are there for us to take lesson from. All of these things are there for us that we can relate to. We may at times put barriers between us and certain individuals mentioned in the Quran but if we were to understand and recognize that they are human beings like us and go through situations just as we do, they become more relatable. They become a source of inspiration for us. And this is what the Quran is aspiring to do. Now, in the next slide, we see that Allah says in Surah 29, which is Surah Ankabut, verse 43, after drawing the example of the weakness of the spider web, as he says, مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ اتَّخَذُوا مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ أَوْلِيَاءَ كَمَثَلِ الْعَنْكَبُوتِ اتَّخَذَتْ بَيْتًا. The like of those who have taken other than Allah as guardians is like the spider that has taken its house. And The weakest of houses is the house of the spider. If you look at the spider web, how weak it is. Just a gust of wind just breaks it. And then Allah continues, وَتِلْكَ الْأَمْثَالُ نَضْرِبُهَا لِلنَّاسِ. These parables we draw for man. وَمَا يَعْقِلُهَا إِلَّا الْعَالِمُونَ. And none grasps them except those who have knowledge. So these stories of the prophets, of these examples, are there for us to take something. But sometimes, we get bogged down in the details. And the details are fine. And it's interesting to know the details. We get bogged down in the minor details. The details are there as a means. There's something greater at the end. There's a lesson to be taken. There's something to be implemented. In Surah Kahf, for example, Allah mentions this discussion between people, that they are saying, how many of the people of the cave are there? Some say 5, 6, 7, 8. Allah is pointing to that. The number is not that important. There may be a number that some people know, but what is more important is the message that is got from it, the lesson that we can gain from it, the implementation that we can have. So these nights of Laylatul Qadr are there for us to read these verses, take some time out, reflect, and apply these stories within our life. Now, one of the style of the Quran is that it may not go into detail of the story. It may just on a very superficial level touch on the story, and the detail is got from elsewhere. But the focus that the Quran does many a time is the message, the lesson that is got from that story. And also, just as we have these movies, I'm sure you've seen this series, The Messiah, that all of a sudden stops abruptly. The Quran sometimes in its stylistic fashion does not give all the details, making us curious, making us want to know more. So going to the story in the next slide of Prophet Nuh. This surah talks about Prophet Nuh in verse 14 and 15. وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا نُوحًا إِلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ فَلَبِثَ فِيهِمْ أَلْفَ سَنَةٍ إِلَّا 50 عَامًا. And we sent Nuh to his people. He stayed with them for 950 years. فَأَخَذَهُمُ الطُّوفَانُ وَهُمْ ظَالِمُونَ. And the floods overtook them whilst they were oppressive. Now, Nuh's story is one that is quite interesting. It's one that we can take some very powerful lessons from. If we see in the next slide, that Nuh used to call out to his people. In Surah 71, verse 5, قَالَ رَبِّي إِنِّي دَعَوْتُ قَوْمِي لَيْلًا وَنَهَارًا. He is talking to Allah. He is saying, oh God, I have called these people night and day. He has spent his nights and days calling out to these people, but they didn't listen to him. فَلَمْ يَزِدْهُمْ دُعَائِي إِلَّا فِرَارًا. My calling out to them resulted in nothing except them turning away more. But his persistence that he had, he never gave up so easily. He persisted and persisted and persisted. He was always trying, and he was compassionate for them. In other places of the Quran, he calls out to them. He said, I don't want you to be punished. I feel for you. And this is something that we can take from. There are certain individuals that we may lose hope in. These people aren't responding, or these people have gone down a certain path, but don't lose hope in them. Try your utmost best. Try and try and try. And help them wherever you need. One of the things that we tends to happen to us is that we judge people. We're very quick in judging. That this person has done this, look down at them. But you look at the example of Prophet Nuh. He went to them and went to them and went to them, and he never gave up. It's only after they turned away time and time again, and they challenged him, and they asked him to bring the punishment, that he called out to Allah for that punishment. But there's a lesson in that we shouldn't judge individuals. We should be unbiased. People go through what they go through. People have sometimes a crisis within their faith, within their belief, within their understandings. We need to be there for those individuals, and even if it's just as a listening ear for them to bounce off you. Very important, very difficult, but very important to be there for individuals without judging them. Be there as a source of goodness for them. In this discussion that Prophet Nuh has with these individuals, he asks them, مَا لَكُمْ لَا تَرْجُونَ اللَّهِ لَا تَرْجُونَ لِلَّهِ وَقَارًا. What is wrong with you? Why don't you rely on God as a source of reliance? وَقَدْ خَلَقَكُمْ أَطْوَارًا. Whilst He has created you. أَلَمْ تَرَوْنَ كَيْفَ خَلَقَ اللَّهُ سَبْعَ سَمَاوَاتٍ طِبَاقًا. Now he is evoking the rational arguments with them. He said, have you not seen how Allah has created the 7 heavens in layers? وَجَعَلَ الْقَمَرَ فِيهِنَّ نُورًا وَجَعَلَ الشَّمْسَ سِرَاجًا. Have you not seen how He has created the moon as a source of reflection and the sun as a lantern? وَاللَّهُ أَنْبَتَكُم مِّنَ الْأَرْضِ نَبَاتًا. And He has brought about from the earth plants. He's now evoking another element. He's making them think, as we see in stories of other prophets also. And we may come to the story of Ibrahim when he breaks the idols and they return to themselves, right? He is alluding to that intellect, that look around you. And it's important for us. Look, at one place the Quran says, look at the weakness of the spider web. Another place, look at the heavens and the earth. The Quran is alluding to stop. Look around you. Take some time out whilst you're walking on the streets or in your house or wherever you are. Be mindful. Be aware of the smallest details. Be aware of the smell and the touch and how everything is around us and how everything leads to God. So we see this, that He's calling out, and He's continually calling out to His people. He is caring, He is loving for them. But there reaches a point where He calls out to Allah, and He calls out to bring His punishment. But even in that situation, even at that point, Allah says, وَاصْنَعِ الْفُلْكَ بِأَعْيُنِنَا. Build the ark. It's reached a point. Build the ark in front of our eyes. وَوَحْيِنَا وَلَا تُخَاطِبْنِي فِي الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا. However, don't talk to me about those who have done wrong. Alluding to that Nuh still has a soft spot for these individuals. So Nuh comes to this situation where he's told to build this ark. And according to the narrations, he's amongst this community and he's told to first plant trees. So this community passes by and starts laughing at him, mocking him. Look at this old person. He's lived with us for so many years. Now he started to plant trees. What's wrong with him? And then once these trees had grown big, he was inspired to cut them. He cuts them and they come these كُلَّمَا مَرَّ عَلَيْهِمْ قَوْمٌ سَخِرُوا. Every time a people passed, they would mock him. He cut the trees. He started building the ark. And these people would come again and they would mock him. But at all these points, Nuh had perseverance. And it's difficult that when everybody else is mocking us, when everybody else is making fun of us, it's a difficult situation to be in, to persevere, to remain focused. But Nuh was that, and he remained focused. وَفَارَتْ النُّورُ. And once this ark was created and he got what was needed onto that ark, the earth split open and rain started falling. And we know the whole story that occurred therein. However, as we've outlined certain important points, certain lessons that we can take, one thing that stands out is in Surah 17, verse 3. Allah says about Prophet Nuh, إِنَّهُ كَانَ عَبْدًا شَكُورًا, that he was a servant that was constantly grateful. He was continuously grateful. He wasn't Shakir, he was Shakur. He was continuously grateful. For a person to have gone through all this, for a person to have been mocked at all stages, and according to the narrations, this community would throw stones at him and they would attack him to a state where he would at times faint. In this situation, still after all this, Allah calls him a servant who is grateful. And gratitude is an attitude that is very powerful, very potent for us in different situations, in situations of tribulation, in situations of non-tribulation. It actually puts us into a mindset that brings about positivity. It brings about not only positivity to us, but to all around us. As Allah says in the Quran, لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. If you are grateful, I will increase you. This is what gratitude does, where you see situations may be difficult, but you see the positive within them. Appreciate that it may be difficult at times, but just looking, and it brings us to that notion of being aware of what is around us. We start to become grateful of what we have. And even in the current situation, we see that many people have lost their jobs. We see many people in third world countries who are in a desperate situation. We are, alhamdulillah, many of us are in a situation that we're surviving, that everything is fine. Some people are in far worse situations than we are. So it's important for us to just take some time out and realize, and perhaps one thing that we can do in these nights of Qadr is just sit down and think about how grateful we are that Allah has given us so much. As the Imams, Imam Hussein and other Imams mention in their du'as, outlining the benefits, the bounties that Allah has bestowed upon us. So it may be useful for us to take some time out, and even if it's for 10 minutes on these nights of Qadr, to take some time out and reflect without any other thoughts of how grateful we are. What is it that we're grateful for? That brings about a snowball effect of positivity, and hopefully that will bring about a positive outcome in the A'mal. So in the next slide, I'll just summarize a few points that we can take away from the story of Nuh and these other verses that we've outlined. One of persistence, that we may have situations that we are laughed at, mocked at, looked down upon, but we need to persist. We need to constantly persist. The two very important point is being aware of how you feel, being aware of how the situation is, linking it back to that first few verses of Surah Ankabut, that do you think that you can claim to say you believe whilst not being tested? Are we even aware of how we're feeling, or what our faith is, or what is going on within us? And that brings about, once you're aware, another step is to be grateful. Gratitude, a very powerful tool to just take some time out and realize how much Allah has given. We tend to focus on what has been taken from us, but in reality, We don't really own anything. Nothing of this is ours. We were all gifted this. Being grateful for what we've been gifted is very powerful, and that brings about hope, which is the last takeaway that, and there are many other takeaways that we can take from these stories. And I think the last slide, it's befitting in these nights of Imam Ali's martyrdom to just think about how this individual lived his life. He is in the situation where he's struck by a sword by Ibn Muljim. And one would think that somebody in that situation would want to exact revenge straight away, or at the very least, not be concerned about the right of the person who has injured him. Yet Imam Ali is so upright that he wants justice, that this person is served in a just manner, that not to oppress him unduly, unjustly. So aware he is. And we find this in the life of Ali ibn Abi Talib throughout his life, in different situations. He's aware of his emotions. When he gets angry, he reflects and takes a step back, as we see in certain battles. When he is judging between individuals, he realizes that he needs to be just, even though he is in situations of power. He is just. So really, we need to take a leaf from the life of Imam Ali and try and implement it. It may be a sad time, the death of Ali ibn Abi Talib, but it's even sadder if we don't implement his life and try and become like him. I'll end here with a short prayer. Let us remember all those individuals throughout the world who are undergoing whatever difficulty they may be undergoing, whatever tribulation they may be undergoing. We pray to Allah for all those who are sick to make them well, for all those who are going through difficulties in all parts of the world, regardless of race, regardless of religion, regardless of background. Oh Allah, help them. Oh Allah, help humanity as a whole. And we see goodness coming out in humanity. Oh Allah, bring about more goodness within humanity, that we realize this goodness in all of us. We pray to Allah to accept all our actions, our deeds, our amals in these nights, to make us proximate to Him, to take lessons from this Quran, to reflect and to become better individuals. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.
Thank you very much, Sheikh. Prior to starting the question and answers, we would like to invite the president of the organization to give us a short address.
Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First and foremost, extending our heartfelt condolences to the Imam of our time, Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Sharif, on the shahadat of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali al-Murtaza, salawatullah alayhi salam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. I take it, this being the first of the 5 series that Sheikh Ali Raza has been talking about on Surah Ankabut. You'll find it of benefit, that hope that it'll help us all transcend. I just want to bring it to your attention that programs like this and those that we have been able to host are made possible with your generous contributions. For that, I want to thank you. The Organization for Islamic Learning is registered as a non-profit charitable organization under the Canadian laws. We encourage you to visit our websites for resources, as well as being able to make your donations online and continue your support of the organization. A tax-deductible receipt will be issued. At the end, Ahsan wa jazakallah khair insha'Allah. Wa salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. محمد وآل محمد.
We will now begin the Q&A portion of the program. If you have a question and have not already submitted it, please go to menti.com and type in code 250400 in order for us to receive your question. We have one question so far. Well, they're kind of related. So you mentioned that identity can be a good thing. But nowadays, it's seen more as a way to highlight the differences within the community. Wouldn't it be better to say that we are Muslim and not go further than that?
Yeah, perhaps at times it's beneficial to have an identity. It still is an identity. And even being a Muslim is an identity that can be used negatively. You are the non-Muslim, right? We're boxing the non-Muslim into another box. Perhaps we need to adopt an identity that is encompassing everyone at times. At times, we may want to adopt an identity for the sake of bettering individuals or motivating individuals to do certain things. So depending on how you look at it, yes, definitely, there are times where we should be adopting. At the heart, at the level of the heart, we all are one creation. As Imam Ali says, that we all are one creation. As soon as these identities become blocks, as soon as these identities become reasons of division, there's a problem there. And we should rethink that. But definitely, we need to look at humanity as a whole and realize that we all are created from that one soul. As the Quran says, we have created you from one soul. And it stems and it flows through all of us, the goodness, the light of God. For one to realize that, for one to recognize that is something quite a feat. And in the lap of culture, it may be difficult to do that, to realize that, to recognize that we all are from that single soul, from that single reality. But as we interact with others, as we look at others and how others deal, and as we study and we read more and understand others, we realize that we really are one identity. We are from one family. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
The last question we have is there an Islamic way to practice gratitude?
Yeah, we have in the narrations to count the blessings of God. Also within the Quran, it's alluded to. And if we look at psychology today, we have these gratitude journals. Very powerful tool for people who have undergone trauma, have undergone different situations, to write down daily on a regular basis that this is what I have. Just write down, today I was grateful for one thing, right? And we have this within the narrations of counting your blessings, looking at those who are below you in terms of material, and being grateful for what you have. So we do have these allusions made within the narrations. The message is there within the Quran. It's got there from the lives of the prophets, the Ahlul Bayt, linking it to today's society and today's tools that we have developed over hundreds of years. There are tools that are there within the narrations that are also implemented today for people who have undergone, even people who haven't undergone anything. Still a very powerful mechanism for us to better ourselves, to better our outlook, to be productive.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sheikh, for your time today. And we do look forward to continuing the discussions with you tomorrow. That concludes our program for the day. And I would like to end with a request for a Surah Fatiha for those who are no longer with us.